Hi everyone, welcome back to another how to use video. This is a series of videos I'm doing looking at Astra Militarum unit types like transports and battle line, and actually looking at how to actually use the unit as opposed to just what the data sheet says and does. So my channel is a true variety hub for Astra Militarum. I cover everything from the lore of Astra Militarum, drawn from my military experience in the Australian infantry. A recent video being the Cadian Kazakh, and a lot of you like to serve as one of those elite troops. Tactics, like I just said, and then also building and painting tutorials and videos. So a real variety hub for Astra Militarum content. Cool, so the previous video I've done in this series is the battle line unit, so check out this linky here, whichever side it is, to see that, which looks at the battle line units within the current index for Astra Militarum. So, as at December 2024, we've got 3 transport options, and these are dedicated transport options, yeah, the dedicated transport keyword. Now, there are some other transport options out there, like the Valkyrie, the Crussus, the big four-jawed model, and also some of the Baneblade family, but the focus of this video is going to be mostly the dedicated transports. But the principles will apply also to the larger transports, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just focused on 3 data sheets here. So you can see the Chimera, or the Chimera, whatever you want to call it, the Taurox and Taurox Prime, 70, 65, and 90 points. Now, again, not getting too much into the actual data sheets, the general opinion is that currently the Chimera, or the Chimera, is the best of the bunch. It moves 10, it's got toughness 9, 11 wins 3+ save, and OC2. It's got 12 lasgun shots at 12 inches. It's got 2 heavy flamers or 2 heavy bolters, hunter-killer missile, which is also very nice, and a stubber. And that also has got firing deck too, so it can get a fair bit of firepower out. Now the Taurox, at 65 points, only 5 points cheaper, you trade all of those weapons and a pip of toughness. It goes from toughness 9 to 8, and basically what you get then is a twin-linked autocannon and a storm bolter, and then you can basically move 12, advance, and debus. So on average, you're going to get an additional 3 inches. So the way to think about it is you're going to get an additional 5 inches of movement out of that model with the advance roll on average. Then the boys can debus 3 inches outside that, but they can't charge after that, obviously. So overall, its rule isn't as strong as the Chimera, and the Taurox Prime is locked into the Commissariat and also the Tempestus Scion model. So its use mostly is to debus the troops, and then they get 4 rerolls to hit. But broadly speaking, looking at competitive winning lists, the Chimera Chimera is the one to go for. Cool, so what won't transports do? Now, a lot of this is pretty obvious, but I always want to sort of state this to get us mentally going. Yeah, so they won't move or fly through walls. Obviously, they're a vehicle. Now, the reason why this is important to call out is compared to the things they carry inside, infantry, they can do that. Now, they obviously can't fly, they're not jet bikes, but this then basically really forces you to plan where they actually go. Now, again, it's obvious, but infantry have got more flexibility. They can move through walls, so there's literally nowhere on the tabletop they can't get to within the confines of their actual movement characteristics, versus vehicles, or vehicles which are ground-based, they have to basically maneuver through walls, around walls rather. Now, they don't have high OC, and I do say this because typically the occupants have got higher OC, either at their battle line or there's lots of the bodies, like 10 bodies is OC 10. But on these 3 units here, OC of 2 can be made OC of 3 via an order. Duty and honor typically means you will struggle to hold an objective if your opponent has got anything beyond just say a single character or 2 dudes left in a squad, for example. Yeah. Now, as I said, they won't cause a traffic jam, or they'll definitely cause a traffic jam, and this gets into deployment, which we'll look at in a moment. So you want to be super careful. Obviously, Astra Militarum is quite a vehicle-heavy army, and it can be. So if you're leaning into a very vehicle-heavy list, you want to plan out your deployment quite carefully to make sure you don't come into an absolute traffic jam. And if your opponent's quite a chargy opponent, imagine World Eaters or maybe Orcs, they could just turn one, charge you, and clog you up, and then the game's over, yeah? Now, obviously, transports are vehicles. They're toughness 8 or toughness 9. We saw they've got a 3+ save for these options we're looking at earlier, so they won't withstand dedicated anti-tank weapons. So anti-tank weapons are things like las cannons, hammerhead, super shooters, or anything which is, a higher strength than 9, let's agree, yeah? So it does mean that you need to be relatively choiceful where they go. on the tabletop, what they're exposed to, and then likewise when it comes to melee, I typically find in 10th edition that melee is what kills vehicles, as opposed to kills vehicles easily, as opposed to DACA, yeah? So yeah, that's what they won't do. Now, what will they do? So they'll obviously protect the infantry, the squishy stuff inside the good stuff. They'll give your infantry a +3 movement on debus. So basically thinking about the fact that they debus, they get a +3 movement organically because they're debus 3 inches outside the transport, which means you don't have to give them the order move via an officer, so that's good. They can act as a staging point, and we'll look at that on Tabletop Simulator in a moment. They can do low-level damage, and also combined with firing deck, they can do some decent damage. So obviously, as I said, the Chimera is definitely the little gun bus, 2 heavy flamers or heavy bolters, a stubber, 12 lads gun shots at 12 inches plus a hunter-killer missile. You will pick off wounds against basically most infantry, so it will do a bit of damage. And then combine the fact you've got firing deck 2 for the Chimera, you can get 2 flamers, 2 special weapons, or maybe 2 ograms with the ripper guns just blatting away. So they will do some low-level damage. Now they will also absorb small and medium fire weapon shots. Yeah, so if anything's below a strength 9, arguably they're going to struggle to sort of bring low a Chimera or even a Taurox. And then with that, don't forget, as always, we've got the smoke screen stratagem. Given all 3 of these units have got the smoke keyword, so you can use smoke screen. Actually, watch out, is that the Taurox doesn't have the smoke keyword. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Okay, so the Tauroxes don't have the smoke keyword, but the Chimera does. So that's interesting. So the Chimera can use a smoke screen stratagem, which means you're -1 to hit, and crucially also you've got a cover save as well. So for whatever reason, if it's plonked right in the open, not covered by terrain, you get both the benefit of cover plus obviously -1 to hit. Also, you then have got you've got smoke screen, you've got armored might, which is a 2 CP stratagem, quite expensive at Astra Militarum, where you can -1 damage incoming ranged attacks. So it definitely can make this vehicle a bit more survivable. And definitely, as I said, it will absorb, unless your opponent points at something serious at this model, it shouldn't die against just like bolters and that type of thing. Cool, so that's what they won't and will do. Now let's get on to some key themes, and we're going to go to Tabletop Simulator. So we're going to basically look at 5 key areas, which is deploying to avoid a car park, projecting a threat bubble versus a direct fire line, a direct threat line, and we'll look at that as an example. Setting up effective debussing, debussing and rebusing effectively, and just to be very clear, debussing is known as disembarking, but debus is a military term I had when I was working with APCs to debus. So disembark, re-embark, disembark, debus, rebus effectively, and then also movement blocking and tagging in the appropriate scenario. So let's now go to Tabletop Simulators to sort of bring this to life. So firstly, we'll be deploying to avoid a car park. Right, so if we imagine this deployment zone, so just focus on these 6 models at the moment, yeah? So we're doing search and destroy, which is the quarter deployment. You can see you've got here and here. So again, not talking too much about unit combinations, but a real favourite at the moment is the Catachan Jungle Fighters and a Chimera, otherwise known as a Scout Mera, because it can scout move. So with that in mind, you obviously want to be making sure that you had taken advantage of that rule upon deployment, yeah, because the scout move occurs in a deployment phase, so you want to make sure that the Chimeras are in a position, these 2 here, where they can effectively scout move. So given the objectives are here, and also there, I've elected in this example to have 1 down here, so it can easily scout move 6 out that way if you go first. And then also this one here, potentially, you either could scout move at 6, move at 3, then move another 2 and a bit up there, to plonk it there. Or if you've been more cautious, you simply scout move at an extra inch, so it's up against the wall of this terrain piece here, yeah? Now, then within the overall mindset of all the rest of your army, and obviously this is just my tanks, I've got 4 Leman Russ and 2 Chimeras, for example, I've got loads of other infantry, but here it's then sort of thinking, how do I make sure I'm not getting myself into a sticky scenario where, for whatever reason, I've just basically, for example, ran myself up like that, and all my tanks are just stuck in one area, for example, yeah. So you want to be basically always thinking about, how do I basically ensure that my key pieces in this army can support differing parts of the board, or dominate parts of the board, and basically not causing yourself to get stuck here. So in this example, I've actually elected to put one battle tank here, one battle tank here, and one in the center. And given you can put one tank in reinforcements via Lord Solar's ability at the moment, I basically put this one in here, so it can come in from reinforcements in the later part of the game. And again, this is getting into different areas, which I'm trying to over-conceptualize this. But you know, in this mission, you basically are fighting over this objective here, and you're turning off this objective here, for example, and then you want to basically, you know, fight here. So you want to have resources to deal with that. So you've got one tank that can get here and do some shooting there, and then you've got one tank that can apply firepower here, and then also one here, depending, it may have to apply fire in the center if your opponent's been quite aggressive, or move here, apply fire there, or move there, or there, and assist with firepower there, yeah. So again, with the Chimeras, given in this example, they've got the scout move, you want to make sure you're maximizing that here, and also there. So deployment's probably not as much a takeaway there, but do remember that, you know, you want to avoid car parks, and avoiding car parks can either be via the list you decide to take, or it's clever deployment. Yeah, because again, this deployment zone, you could get rushed relatively easily if your opponent's got advance and charge, and if you did put stuff here, you want to make sure it's the right things to go there, like bulkrums, for example. So let's remove this now from the tutorial, so it's not confusing. Right, let's now get onto threat bubbles and threat lines. Now this is quite theoretical, and definitely will really help for melee-focused armies, to which Guard is not a melee-focused army, but it will help bring to life how to also use transports effectively. So as you know, again, this is probably something that took me a while to understand, but with shooting weapons, they obviously have fixed lines of threat. Yeah, so this is super obvious. So we've got an autocannon Leman Russ. For it to apply fire here, it needs to either get there, or, oh gosh, that terrain piece shouldn't have moved, or go there, yeah? Let's move this out of the way. That's crazy it happened. Or go there. Now, as opposed to, let me just turn on auto row so I don't break things again. So if you want to get firepower here, you need to easily shoot there or shoot there. Now, if you want to get to it via melee, you basically need to be within charge range, yeah? So if we've got a Chimera or Bulgrums inside, you don't actually have to see the target to charge the target, obviously, yeah? Now, the other way to think about it is we've got the Chimera here, and basically, you know, as I said, Leman Russ battle tank, if this one is here, it can shoot basically here, there, stops there, it can shoot there, it can shoot through here, and obviously it can't shoot through this wall, yeah? But given this Chimera is here, and the Bulgrums inside have got a 6-inch move, it basically means you've got a 9-inch threat range that goes there, it goes there, it goes all the way out here, and obviously goes out here as well, yeah? So obviously, a 9-inch movement, 3 inches D-plus 6-inch move, it means you've got a 9-inch movement, add 12 for a maximum charge range. That means the actual threat range of this vehicle with dudes inside is 21 inches. So, of course, you're not going to bang a 12-inch charge. If you go for it, you're pretty brave. But conceptually, and a good opponent will be considering this, because they'll basically think, okay, if these 3 Bulgrums can bust out of the vehicle 9 inches and move 12 inches on a charge, that means the actual threat range of this model is huge. Yeah. Now, this probably gets a bit more theoretical, but then actually, using the footprint of a Chimera versus 3 Bulgrums, you're probably going to actually get sort of like a bit more movement out of it, if it makes sense. Because if you put 3 boys like that, and this is getting a bit conceptual, so stick with me, but if you put 3 boys like that, imagine they're lined up. Yeah, their width for their base is, say, 2 inches. The width for this vehicle is 3 inches, means actually when it comes to charging over this way, you get an extra inch. So that's a bit more theoretical, but like basically the footprint of the vehicle will typically be bigger than the boys inside, maybe, so you're getting extra movement out of that. So obviously for Guard, the only real sort of melee option you've got is Bulgrums, and that's where it could be threatening to drive a bus around with these boys inside to jump out and do a charge. but typically you're going to be using more just like battle line, like jungle fighters or Cadian shock. But do think about that, and then crucially think about how your opponent does that to you, yeah, because it's always good to understand how other armies work, and definitely 9th edition, 10th edition is an edition where transports are quite common because this exact thing, yeah, because imagine if this is us in here, you know, you park yourself up against the corner, you hold the objective with Bolgrams inside, you essentially are scaring your opponent off this objective, yeah, because if you've got, you know, if they plonk some dudes here, the boys get out, have a little field, they bust out 9 inches, 1 inch charge and chop them to bits. So again, if your opponent does that to you, how do you effectively manage this here, yeah? How do you actually think about that? And then here, again, you need to realise that actually the threat range of this vehicle actually threatens quite a long way, yeah? Because they've actually got a lot of threat range here, yeah? So that is threat bubbles versus threat lines, yeah? And it's a bit more conceptual, but definitely transports enable that to happen. Okay, now on to, let's get this little tabletop so it's not confusing. Now on to effective disembarking and how to think about it from a damage point of view. So in this example, we've got big old scary Magnus about to zap a Chimera. He'll definitely blow a Chimera up. Now, firstly, in this fictitious scenario, like again, what is this vehicle trying to achieve for you? Maybe this vehicle's had to get here to do an action. Maybe it's had to clear the objective of some chaff on it. But given it's going to get actually battered by Magnus, how do we ensure that we're maximising the boys that are inside the vehicle, yeah? So in this example, what I've basically done is I've rammed the vehicle up against the wall, yeah? So when it eventually gets murdered by Magnus, the boys inside can debus 3 inches, and that would be basically here, which means they all, in theory, should be able to fit in this terrain piece. So if we just get these, and it's always quite hard on TTS. TTS is not the easiest because it does stuff like that, but it should, in theory, and I'm very confident you can do this, is that you should be able to get all of these models within 3 inches of the vehicle, which obviously satisfies the current rule, and therefore be on the objective, yeah? So if that's within 3, yep, that should be within 3 inches. So in this example, you know, they've come onto, the Chimera's come onto the objective, it's done whatever, you know, it's done the action, cleared some chaff off, whatever, etc. It's been murdered by Magnus, and then the boys who fall out the truck when it blows up, they land on the objective, yeah? Now, do remember that they will be battle shocked when they fall out of the vehicle, and they also take casualties. So on a 1, they take a mortal wound, which will kill a model. But crucially, when you go into your turn, they're no longer battle shocked. Now, unless loads of them die, imagine if you lost 6, you'd roll 6 ones, that could happen. But crucially, they're battle shocked in your opponent's turn. When they fall out of the vehicle, then you move into your command phase, they're no longer battle shocked. So you could actually hold this objective quite sneakily. So do look out for those scenarios. Again, you know, if we're just going to engineer a couple of examples, is imagine if this Chimera is here. Okay, this is probably a bit of a tougher one, but you know, if you're basically, if the threat's there, and you know that gets blown up, how do you ensure that you've got options that you can debus onto? You can debus the boys into cover, out of direct fire lines. You know, how do you maximise the fact that maybe, let's pretend that maybe Magnus is up in your face, and you know, if he does, he's going to blow up this tank. Is how do you make sure that you make the charge as long as possible? And definitely Magnus is probably a good example, because given his base is quite big, if you debust the boys like this side, could he actually, and I know he's got fly, but if they all plonk themselves here, and you basically extend out the, God, I'm really struggling with TTS today, is that when they debus along there, could he actually get there, because he's got a massive base? So I don't think, he might actually get stuck, and I'm not sure 100%, but again, just make sure that when you debus, you're not just debussing the boys, just plonking with a tabletop. You're actually thinking about how do you preserve them through clever positioning, or how do you maximise their actual existence, like that example there, yeah? So that is effective debussing. And now on to rebus and debus. This is a bit more, this is definitely the cooler part of it, is that imagine, let's put this, so this Chimera is here, yeah, and your opponent is deployed here, and then you've got some other blokes up here. and they're the ones inside. Yes, imagine they're inside. So in this scenario, we've got some jungle, some Cadian shock in the transport, and also some in here. Right, so in your movement phase, what you will like to do is you push these boys 6 inches up against the wall here in the corner, and then you give this vehicle move. So therefore it moves 13, so let's just say it moves, call it 4 inches, 4 inches plus 9, that plonks it right there. And then you debus the boys inside. So you decide to actually get them out because you want to turn off this objective, so you drop out your 10 blokes. And in this scenario, let's pretend you've got nowhere to cleverly position them. They are going to die next turn, but that's okay because you've got, let's pretend you've got 3 bodies on there. It's OC6, it out OCs a unit of OC5, and off we go. So that's actually quite good as far as you're concerned. Now is, you wouldn't necessarily do this, but then it's also about, maybe you want to put some more boys back in the Chimera. So given these models within 3 inches, they basically jump into the vehicle, and then we've basically got whatever those Russian dolls are concerned, or call, where you basically take a head off and one appear. So do look out for ways to engineer that. This is obviously quite an aggressive use. The other way to simply do it is, imagine if you've got that scout move Chimera, which we put here in the deployment zone. Yeah, it then sends out some dudes 9 inches onto this objective. And let's pretend you're worried about taking casualties from indirect, God forbid. So you basically stick in 10 more boys into the same old Chimera. So, it is obviously a great little sort of bunker for your blokes to protect them from either indirect or direct fire. Or also, a classic one that's sort of seeing a bit more play because Ogrims are quite cheap right now, is that if you put, you sent out some blokes to contest this objective, you then basically put on some Ogrims, and this becomes like a little party bus driving around with 2 of your flamers, las guns, heavy stubber, and then 2 guys at the back firing the ripper guns. So do make sure you do think about what you are disembarking and what you're re-embarking to maximise it. And it's not always going to come up, but do think about that because, obviously toughness 9 3-up save is much better than toughness 3 5+ save. Cool. Okay. Last but not least is movement blocking. Now, this is something you need to think about in combination with the blokes inside here, because movement blocking just with the Chimera in this example is not as effective because it's quite a small footprint compared to if you get out 10 dudes and you actually draw, you get them and basically go. That's how much physical space they could cover. And then obviously you can do L shapes. You get quite fancy here, but that's a lot more physical footprint than a Chimera can do. Now, a Chimera, Chimera, whatever to call it, can actually do that. So let me turn off deployment zone. So in this example here, let's imagine this Rhino's full of 10 Rubik Space Marines, and they're going to come out and do magical tricks everywhere. So if you just had a Chimera, it's almost like, how do you protect this objective? So just like when I spoke about battle line, the previous tutorial I did, is you want to be placing it in a way that basically you're controlling its debus. So if you go there, they can bust out 6 and then go bust out 3 and under there. If you put yourself maybe like that, it could help, maybe. So given they need to respect your engagement range, you're basically sort of widening their debus. They have to basically come out maybe here. They probably still can get there, but that's helping. Maybe you basically decide to plonk the Chimera right there, and that also controls the way they come out of it, albeit they're going to come out here. But obviously the most effective way to use movement blocking with a transport is with the blokes inside helping you. So the ultimate example here is to basically move the Chimera here. Correction, actually, so we'll debus the boys first. So if they're debus 9, they come out here. That should be 9 inches. You've got loads of space there. Up against the wall, like that, or an inch off the wall so they can't charge you, like this, like that, and then we'll basically string these bad boys out. And what we'll do will be quite tricky. Weave the Chimera in a second. They should be an inch off the wall, like that, and like that. And then you put one bloke just there, and then you have another guy just floating around. Then you basically advance this vehicle and basically put it exactly like that. So now you've actually got a big old fat movement block. So the only way the Rubik Marines can come out is go here, That means they can't get there. Sure, they could come out here and charge. Sure, they could get here and shoot that. They could then charge these boys, but you're basically going to make it harder for your opponent. Yeah, so do look for smart ways to movement block with the vehicle, but typically it works best when you're using it in combination with also the supporting troops inside. Cool, so that is the 5 points I had, which is deploying effectively, understanding the idea of using these as a threat bubble versus a threat line when you're shooting, effectively debusing, which we showed with Magnus blowing up the Chimera down here, debussing and rebussing, do look out for opportunities to do so, and then also movement blocking and also tagging in this example here. Now, just with tagging, before I move on, is that in the battle line tutorial, I spoke about, tagging with your infantry squads, and in that scenario, you're going to be very careful because obviously, toughness 3, 5+ save is very, very tissue paper versus toughness 9, 3+ save and 11 wounds. Now, tagging is something you should be considering if it can control the game, if it can turn off your opponent from doing things. Now, a really bad example would be, imagine there's Magnus and you don't want him to fly about and disrupt the rest of your game plan. Is that, okay, horrible example, you basically tag him with a Chimera, yeah. So let's pretend it's not Magnus, it's something less crazy than Magnus, maybe like a lesser Demon Prince or something, or not a Demon Prince, maybe something less crazy than this big Magnus here. But the point is that you can probably, with more confidence, tag units with a Chimera than you can with infantry, yeah, because a Chimera is going to survive more than obviously infantry are. So that's a bit about tagging finally. Cool, now back onto the PowerPoint slide for some final points. Cool, so the other key points is don't throw away your transports too early in the game. I can think of a lot of games where in turns 4 and 5 they basically help me win the game, because often just the way the secondary objective cards come out of the deck is maybe you get loads of action secondaries in turns 4 and 5, and you'd hate to be in the position where you don't have enough stuff left, which obviously can happen, or you need to be basically doing more damage than actually doing actions. So having a Chimera or a Taurox alive in turns 4 and 5 is great, because then it zooms out, does containment, does deploy locus, does area denial, for example, or sabotage, for example. So don't throw them away too early. They definitely are a late game piece as well. They can be quite good. So don't forget tank shock. Tank shock is fantastic on this model, given its strength 9, toughness 9 rather. You've got 9 chances on a 5 up to do mortal wounds. So as I said, you're going to do low level damage, also in combination with firing deck, whack on tank shock, and suddenly you've got something which could probably clear light infantry out, or even medium infantry with power armor. As said, smokescreen and armored might. Smokescreen for me is just something that I just always use and abuse. Armored might, to be honest, I use less and less, because most serious DACA is above damage 3. What I mean by most serious DACA is anti-tank DACA, and then it makes little difference. But if you're going up against mass plasma weaponry, which is damage 2, that's where it could be quite good. But obviously 2 CP is quite expensive. And yeah, firing deck on the Chimera is fantastic. Don't forget, you can use basically anything in the firing deck. It says firing deck 2, which means anything on board can do that. So if you want to do some cool little games with heavy weapon squads with maybe 2 mortar tubes, super cool to be thinking about them firing out of the back of an APC, or las cannons, the Ograms I spoke about, but also a cheeky one I've realised is also you could do the Primera Psycho, just going around casting spells with its dev wounds. That could be quite nice, but definitely firing deck is a very effective rule on the Chimera. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Definitely not as long as the Battle Line Unit 1, because I do think that the application of transports probably isn't as powerful as Battle Line, and what I mean by that is the most powerful thing in Battle Line is OC2, yeah? So do make sure you check out that video that I did a couple of days ago, which talks about that. But transports almost are in service of your Battle Line, yeah? As I said, you could put Ograms and Bolgrams in there, but definitely where the powerful combination is, whacking in some jungle fighters or some Cadian shock into the back of it, and then sending those boys off to basically stand on objectives and turn off OC, movement block, that type of thing. So as I said, obviously we've got the Baneblade transports, you've got the Crussus, you've got the Valkyrie. They're all transports, but within the current competitive meta, and I'm talking competitive player 40k, typically the Chimera is the pick of the litter, with the Taurox Prime having some application for Scions, but typically it's mostly the Chimera. So hopefully helpful. If there's any questions, please let me know. If I've missed anything key, tell me, because I want to learn from you as well. I always look at the comments. I'll either reply to you or leave a little love heart, the YouTube like thing. So do make sure you ask me any questions, clarify any points I've made. If I've got anything wrong, tell me. If I've missed anything key, also tell me as well, because I learn a lot from you, the audience, as opposed to just Jeff in my flat in London. So as always, if you want to support my channel, you can do so with a like, comment, or by subscribing, joining my Patreon platoon, or becoming a channel member. As said, I'm a true Astra Militarum variety hub, covering everything from the lore of Astra Militarum, tabletop tactics, and also painting, kit bashing, and assembly videos. So massive thanks to my current supporters, be it the Patreon platoon members and also channel members. So get your bayonet sharp, let's go unoiled. Faith in the Emperor strong. Patreon platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn. Tank Commander Mitchell. Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten. Lieutenant Burke Nielsen. Lieutenant Smith. Colour Sergeant DuPont. Sergeants Adal, Scott, the Colonel Merrill, Veteran Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Coquelin, Easing, Wood, Hills, Malik, Nitton, Nguyen, Tompkin, Conscript England, Evan Gunn, Goodwin, Honorary Members Bolgram King, Psyche Smith, Tempestus Cyan Gaylard.